The air was still on the morning of August 6, 1915. Osowiec Fortress, a decrepit Russian outpost tucked in what is now northeastern Poland, stood like a scar on the battlefield of World War I. For months, it had withstood relentless German assaults. But on this morning, the wind carried something new, something far more horrifying than bullets or bombs. Chlorine gas. The Germans were sure this would be the end. After weeks of artillery and failed infantry pushes, they turned to science. A massive chemical attack, using 30 batteries and a cloud of chlorine, was unleashed upon the defenders of the fortress. Thick green mist rolled over trenches, into barracks, down corridors. It choked the earth and suffocated birds mid-flight. The grass itself turned yellow and brittle. To the Germans, this wasn't just an assault, it was a guaranteed massacre. The defenders were poorly equipped, poorly trained, and unprepared for the horrors of modern chemical warfare. And they were right, almost. Inside the fortress, men clawed at their faces. Russian soldiers vomited blood, gasping for air, their lungs liquefying from the inside. There was no escape. Some tried to cover their mouths with handkerchiefs soaked in urine, the only primitive method to reduce chlorine's effects. But it was hopeless. Bodies lined the trenches. Eyes bled. Tongues swelled. They should have all been dead. So when the German infantry marched confidently toward the stronghold minutes later, they expected silence. They expected empty trenches, twitching corpses, and the hollow victory of poison. Instead, what they saw made their blood run cold. Rising from the mist were men. Barely men. Skeletons in uniform. Their skin was scorched black, their faces twisted into grotesque masks of blood, burns, and bile. Their uniforms were shredded. Blood poured from their mouths as they coughed up pieces of lung tissue. But in their hands, they held rifles. And on their faces, what was left of them was rage. A small detachment of roughly 60 Russian soldiers, coughing, wheezing, dying, but not yet dead, launched a bayonet charge directly into the heart of the approaching German force. The attackers froze. They had never seen anything like it. The Russians weren't just attacking, they were howling. They looked like corpses, half-resurrected, moving on raw willpower and fury. To the Germans, it wasn't a counterattack. It was a nightmare. They broke ranks. Thousands of trained German soldiers turned and fled in panic. They trampled each other. Dropped their weapons. Some ran into their own barbed wire defenses. And in the chaos, the surviving defenders pushed them back, saving the fortress for another few weeks. Later, the event would become known as the Attack of the Dead Men. Some military historians dismissed it as exaggeration. A rumor. A morale-boosting tale twisted in the fog of war. But German and Russian war records both confirm the story. Chemical logs. Infantry logs. Burial counts. Even enemy reports acknowledged something unusual had happened. Something inexplicable. But it wasn't just the gas. It wasn't just the panic. There were whispers of something deeper, something darker, lingering inside Osowiec that day. According to some accounts, 2 Russian soldiers who led the charge were never found. They didn't die in the retreat. They didn't retreat at all. Witnesses claimed they kept walking, silently, into the forest, long after the charge ended. Their skin was gone. Their eyes were hollow. They didn't speak. They didn't blink. And they were never seen again. Some officers reported it as hallucination, trauma from the gas. But the same description surfaced in multiple reports. The same number, 2 men. No names. No ranks. No graves. Just silence. Years later, when the Nazis briefly captured Osowiec during World War II, they refused to occupy the fortress. Not because of structural damage, but because soldiers complained of hearing coughing in the walls. Moaning at night. Some said their rifles misfired near the trenches. Others reported that when they camped within the old Russian bunkers, they woke up with nosebleeds, without any injuries. And then there are the locals. To this day, the surrounding forest remains mostly barren. Trees don't grow tall near the old fort. Animals avoid it. Hunters say birds won't fly overhead. And more than one hiker has claimed to see movement through the mist, figures dressed in tattered World War I uniforms, standing perfectly still at the edge of the woods, then vanishing without a sound. Of course, those are just stories. Right? But here's what history can't deny: the human body has limits. Bones break. Skin burns. Lungs collapse. But on that day, in that forgotten fortress, something pushed past those limits. Whether it was adrenaline, revenge, or something else altogether, we'll never know. Because those men didn't fight to win. They fought to haunt. And haunt they did. Because long after the last shot was fired and the gas had cleared, their story spread through the ranks. Soldiers on both sides whispered about it. The living were terrified. Not just by the war, but by the idea that death itself could be defied by sheer hate, rage, and will. Osowiec was never a major turning point in World War I. It didn't shape borders or break alliances. But what happened there mattered. It reminded the world that even in a war of machines, chemicals, and cold strategy, there was still something ancient lurking beneath the surface. Something primal. Something undead. And that's why they call it the attack of the dead men. Because history may bury facts. But legends, they tend to crawl back up. If this story chilled you, if it forced you to imagine the sheer terror of watching death rise from a gas-filled trench, then you're exactly the kind of person we make these videos for. Hit the like button if you're ready for more dark chapters of forgotten wars. Subscribe to the channel so you never miss the next real-life horror that slipped through the cracks of history. And drop a comment below: do you believe it was pure willpower, or something not of this world? Because some ghosts wear uniforms. And some wars never really end. We'll see you in the next one.